of Bill C-18. I just want to welcome Mr. Massey, who will be replacing Mr. Garrison throughout this study. Welcome to our committee, Brian. Really good to have you. So I know that we're all quite familiar now with the Zoom technologies, but I'll remind members to speak slowly and clearly, to be on mute if you're not speaking, and to please unmute yourself when you when you are speaking, and to mute yourself when you're not speaking. And with that, I would like to welcome Mr. Waugh, who is here by video conference, even though he's in Ottawa. Mr. Waugh, go ahead. You have 5 minutes to make your opening remarks. And I'll just remind members, I have these cards, a 1-minute card and a 30-second card for members as we go through our questioning, just to make it easier for everyone. Go ahead, Mr. Waugh, welcome, and your time starts.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and all members of the Justice Committee for inviting me here today to discuss Bill C-218, the Safe and Regulated Sports Betting Act. This important piece of legislation seeks to make a rather simple change to the criminal code to remove the long-standing restriction against betting on single sport events, fights, and races. And by the way, I was very happy to see the broad support that this legislation received in the House of Commons last week, and the positive remarks made by all colleagues from all parties. Single event sports betting already takes place in this country, and it is a massive industry. According to some estimates, the single event sport betting industry is worth $14 billion per year. Unfortunately, due to the fact that it is banned under the criminal code, this betting all takes place through offshore betting websites and black market bookmakers, most of whom have ties to criminal organizations like the Hells Angels. This in and of itself spawns a variety of problems. First of all, the fact that single event betting remains prohibited means that the provinces, which are typically responsible for management of lottery and betting systems, are totally unable to regulate this industry. As such, none of these websites or bookmakers are subject to any regulation or taxes. By not being subject to regulation or government oversight, these websites have no consumer protection requirements, aren't required to maintain or support problem gambling programs, don't reinvest or spur any further economic activity in the communities that they generate their profits from. This means that all of the profits from such wagers go straight into the pockets of foreign website operators and criminals. In the case of criminal organizations like the Hells Angels, who operate the black market betting rings and websites across this country, the money generated goes on to fund other forms of criminality, providing increased risk to the safety of our communities. While parlay betting, which requires bettors to select the winners of multiple games correctly, is legal and does already exist as a product available in Canada, parlay betting products like Proline and Sports Select generate only a small fraction of the sport betting in this country, approximately $500 million per year. Now, these products are naturally less attractive to bettors, as the odds of succeeding in their wagers are greatly reduced, so they seek avenues to bet on single events and go toward avenues that most bettors don't realize are actually restricted in this country. So by removing these restrictions in the criminal code and putting single event betting into the hands of the provincial governments, the provinces will be able to offer the products that bettors actually want to bet on and take betting out of the hands then out of this black market. Organizations like the Western Canada Lottery Corporation, Lotto Quebec, Ontario Lottery and Gaming, and others that the governments might entrust with these products have experience in these industries and are highly regulated to ensure consumers are well protected. It also means that the billions of dollars that currently go to offshore sites and criminal organizations are actually going back into our communities, creating jobs and supporting community programs. Many provincial governments and their regulators have expressed their support for this proposal, as I have amateur sport organizations like Canada Soccer, professional sport leagues, including the National Hockey League, National Basketball Association, Major League Baseball, Canadian Football League, and Major League Soccer, community organizations, plus municipal governments. In closing, Madam Speaker, the legalization of single event sport betting provides a much needed opportunity to tackle illegal gambling in this country and create new opportunities for economic development and new avenues for a variety of sectors, especially given the difficult times that we find ourselves in. Bill C-218 has widespread support both in the House and across this country. I trust that in the name of good policy, we can work together to get this legislation through this committee and to the rest of the legislative process. Again, thank you, Madam Chair, and all members of the committee for your time here today. I'm more than happy to answer some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Waugh. 5 minutes on the dot. Appreciate that. So we're now going to go into our first round of questions for 6 minutes each, starting with Mr. Cooper. Go ahead, sir.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's great to see my good friend, Mr. Waugh, here. Kevin, congratulations on the very decisive vote at second reading stage of your bill. And I also acknowledge Mr. Massey, who championed this issue in the last Parliament, demonstrating that this really has support across all party lines and has for some time. I want to pick up or allow you to elaborate a little bit on a few points that you made in your presentation, Mr. Waugh. You noted towards the end that this legislation has support amongst sports leagues like the NHL and CFL. So can you broadly speak to what impact this bill might have on the sports industry in Canada?
Thank you, Mr. Cooper, for the question. Yes, last June, I received endorsements from all 5 professional leagues, and this was a change in their policy. This is the fourth time that this bill has come forward to the House of Commons, second time actually to the Justice Committee, and a lot has changed over the years. It started way back in February, believe it or not, of 2011. So 10 years later, we're still back here trying to get this bill moved on. But the sport leagues back many years ago did not endorse regulated gaming. They have since changed their opinion. And it was because of a Supreme Court decision in New Jersey in 2018 that changed everything, that legalized other states in the United States to actually operate single event betting. Not only Nevada, but of course, New Jersey and New York and Michigan and Montana and so on have hopped on board in the last 2 to 3 years. So yes, the provincial leagues, when you look at these 5 professional leagues, they still supply the data to Nevada for betting in Las Vegas. So they're still very heavily involved in this. They want the single event betting because they have seen the need to get it regulated. And in this country, it is regulated by the provincial bodies. So that's why they came on board, Mr. Cooper, in June to talk about the need in Canada for a regulated single game betting authority.
And just to pick up on that point, Mr. Waugh, in terms of the importance of regulation and oversight for single event sports betting, can you elaborate on how important that is?
Yeah, I think it's very important, Mr. Cooper. You look at society today, they want to be entertained. And sports is entertainment. It's big business. The betting, when I started in broadcasting over 40 years ago, I was a sportscaster, radio and TV in Saskatoon. And, the change in the market, to tell you the truth, Mr. Cooper, it came with sport industries like TSN that started in 1984. Sportsnet started in 1998. So these were channels that went 24/7 on sports. And in the industry, you have to fill black, we say. And so they realized that they needed the need for eyeballs on their channels. And everybody watched the NFL. We got cable from the United States in the 80s. So Sunday sports was big. The NFL, the most bet sports in the world. And so, it's all kind of come together, I would say. You got Mr. Massey in committee and his bill in 2016 that did not pass the House of Commons, and there were others. But I think now is the time in this country to move forward. We have seen the United States adopt this in 2018, and I think now professional leagues are on board 100%, and they want this regulated.
And you mentioned the United States and the court ruling that arose out of action that took place out of the state of New Jersey. Prior to that, only Nevada had it. So you cited a few other states, but I think there's been really significant movement. And I just wonder if you could perhaps expound upon that in the United States in terms of how many states have moved in this direction following the court decision.
Yes, it all started in 92. The U.S. Congress enacted the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, prohibiting states from authorizing sport gambling. However, in a landmark ruling, Mr. Cooper, in 2018, the United States Supreme Court declared that the PASPA was unconstitutional. New Jersey challenged it and won. So since then, we're well into the 20 states in the United States that today are single game betting. Many of those are on the Canadian border, which causes some issues with Niagara Falls and Windsor, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But a lot of the states now are looking at this legislation, and I would say to you that we will have between 40, 45 take this up in the next year in the United States. So you can see this single game event betting is exploding in the United States.
Thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
I see.
Mr.
Well,
Cooper.
I see. My time is expired. At least
10
based
seconds,
upon.
But yep, that's it.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. I will now go to Mr. Kellaway for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and MP Waugh. It's a real pleasure to meet you virtually, and hopefully someday soon we'll have a coffee. And I'd like to learn more about your underlying passions around this bill. Because it becomes evident very quickly that there is a passion for this. And I have a couple of questions for you. Now, appreciating that mental health and addictions falls under provincial jurisdiction, I'm wondering what you think the role of the federal government should be to address gambling addictions.
Great question, Mr. Kellaway. You are correct, 100% correct. It is a provincial jurisdiction. But they can't get there without this bill being passed, third reading in the Senate for study. There has been a lot of studies in this country, and the most recent study was 2 years ago last April, 24th, 25th of 2019, Ethical Sports Symposium. It is a great document, about 26 pages. I've spoken in the House, as have others, to this bill. We need to do more for addictions, mental health. We all know that. Provincial governments right now are putting millions of dollars away to deal with this. I can tell you right now, with unregulated single game betting, we don't know who is next door in our basement going on Bodog, Bet365, any of the criminal organizations. We have no idea. We do have an idea. It's well over $14 billion per year being bet, but we don't know the problem gambling. There's an old saying, Hell's Angels don't have a gambling program. And why would they? They're into this. So provincial governments have been regulating gaming in this country, Mr. Kellaway, for over 30 years. They have the expertise. They're ready for this bill to pass and to legislate it in their provinces and territories. But you do bring up a good point. We have talked about it lots in the House because it is stigma with this bill. What are we going to do with addictions and mental health? That is a big question across the country, whether it's opioids or drinking or smoking or so on.
Thank you so much, MP Waugh, for that. And You mentioned about the provinces supporting it. Is that coast to coast? What is the breakdown in terms of provinces that are behind it? Is it all of them, 70% of them? Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, the Western Canada Lottery Corporation, it looks after Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the territories. They're ready for this. British Columbia is ready for it. Alberta certainly is. Ontario and Quebec. I would say Ontario, Quebec, and BC are the three provinces, the jurisdictions that are ready today to move forward. They're looking at an app on your mobile device that would...
Interesting.
Yeah, so there is lots of competition in this market. DraftKings and Score Media, who you will meet later, I think, in testimony. This is moving very, very quickly. I would say 100%. Some will be up before others. I can tell you, I think Quebec will be one of the first provinces, if this bill is passed, to move forward, along with British Columbia. And Ontario's done a lot of work in this. You're going to meet from my provinces, the Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority. Zane Hansen is coming to your committee, and they employ hundreds and thousands of Indigenous workers in their casinos, and they want to bring this to Saskatchewan, and you're going to hear his story. So I think all jurisdictions are ready for this, and they're working behind the scenes to make sure if this does get passed, that they can get up and running within weeks.
Fantastic. Madam Chair, how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
Okay, great. Because actually, I'm really interested in this bill. You mentioned about organized crime, MP Waugh, and I'm wondering, and you might have addressed this, and I may have missed it, but in terms of, do we have anything quantifiable of the money that is made by organized crime on single sports betting?
Yeah, Paul Burns from the Canadian Gaming Association came up with the $14 billion. He's been working on this for a lot of years. $4 billion is offshore websites like Bodog, Bet365, and so on, because people in this country, they were parlay betting. I mentioned $500 million coast to coast. And parlay betting, as I mentioned in my speech, the odds aren't as good. So if you want to do single game betting, you can't do it legally in this country today. So $4 billion goes to the offshore websites, and up to $10 billion goes to organized crime. And we're not getting any benefit in any jurisdiction in this country when that money, in essence, is leaving the country and doesn't go back into the provincial coffers.
And my last question, thank you for that, MP Waugh. How soon would single sports betting be legalized if this bill passes? How soon?
Well, like I said, I think Quebec was ready 3 to 4 weeks in. They could pull this off. So let's say we get this passed through third reading into the Senate and comes out of the Senate. I think that within a month, single event sport betting could take place in this country, which would really be a bonus in Canada.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Calloway. Monsieur Fortin, voulez-vous commencer pour...
Mr. Fortin, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Hello, Mr. Waugh. It's a very pleasure to meet you here on video. It would be lovely to see you in person. I'm sorry, it's a bit formal, but we certainly can see how passionate you are about this. And of course, over at the Bloc Québécois, you know that we are pretty open to your proposal, but there are, of course, some unknown elements. There's the whole issue of addiction, of gambling addiction. It's an important issue that's of concern to us. We feel that Loto-Québec has good programming to counter gambling addiction, and the province is well positioned to manage problem gamblers. But there's another matter that I was made very aware of last weekend. I was listening to a Radio-Canada show on which specialists came to tell us all about rigged games, pointing out that we need to be very careful, and it was an important issue because organized crime groups rig games, and that if we organize single event betting, this would open the door to their activities. $1 million, for example, could be offered, cheating really, to a goalie tempting them to allow a puck to get through because this would make a good deal of money for certain people. So this is a big issue. That's what I understood from the Radio-Canada show. So what's your take on this? Are we just, opening the door to rigged games?
14. It was interesting in the House of Commons last week when one of your members stood up and talked about the mob activity in Montreal. And so it was an interesting speech that your member gave for 10 minutes in the House of Commons in the final reading of the bill. Like I said, Ethical Sports Symposium 2 years ago, match manipulation and gambling. So we're on top of this in this country. It's a concern. They did a white paper in response to this. Canada, I would say, is doing okay, but it is a concern. I am not going to say it isn't, but at the same time, what do you say today when you have organized crime along with the offshore sites practically involved in it, and we're not getting anything out of this? I think today, when you look at it, Major League Baseball has a program that spring training is going under right now in Arizona and Florida, where the commissioner, Manfred, is talking to the teams about this. The National Hockey League has a program. The NBA has a program. So all professional leagues have a program. They have a staff that is talking to their athletes. They're looking at any manipulation that may or may not happen. But I can't sit here today and tell you it won't happen. I just can't. But the leagues, the professional leagues, are doing their due diligence. And I think in this country, maybe we do need a commission to oversee the professional etiquette of sports in this. That's something that may come eventually out of this bill.
Oui. Donc, vous seriez favorable.
So you would be in favor of the creation of such a commission. But don't you think that we could do this with the legalization at the same time? Maybe we shouldn't be waiting. I'm just thinking out loud. Couldn't we maybe create a program to talk about the negative effects of gaming? And on the other hand, we know that this is going to generate a lot of profits. And I was wondering, so you said that you didn't have a specific amount as to say how much money it would generate for Canada. But do you think that a certain percentage of profits could be used to fight addictions and to fight also organized crime? Would this be possible? Could we not have a certain standard that would be set, a certain percentage that would be fixed?
All the provincial authorities, like the Ontario Lottery Commission, spends over $100 million a year with addictions, advertising and so on. And each province across this country, connected with the lottery corporations, do that. They spend a lot of money on addictions and gambling issues today. Could they spend more with this bill if it passes? Yeah, they could. They're going to get a sizable amount of money from single event game betting. I would say to you that the parlay betting in this country has run its course, run by Proline and Sports Select. I mentioned about $500 million a year. $500 million a year is spent in this country compared to illegal betting of $14 billion. I would say to you, if this bill does get passed, we're speaking of billions of dollars. This is entertainment that people are doing today illegally. This is possible that the betting industry in Canada will certainly go up. I would say it's a 20 billion plus industry per year when this bill does get passed.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci, Monsieur Fortin.
Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
To Mr. Massey for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for having me here today as well, too, as a guest from Industry Committee. I look forward to the study, and thank you, Mr. Waugh, for your work on this bill. It's been very strong, and I know that you've reached out across all party lines, including the first time that you came to me about this, so I really appreciate that. This work actually goes back to Member of Parliament, my former colleague, Joe Comartin. And then I got involved when he became Deputy Speaker. He had to recruit himself from legislative work. So he inherited extra money. I inherited his work on this bill, which is about 10 years in the making. So these are the deals that you make. But at any rate, I do want you, Mr. Waugh, to maybe talk a little bit about the understanding that this law facilitates the provinces to do what they want with regards to single event sport thing. It doesn't make them have to do anything either prematurely or right away. They get to roll out their own organized structures and plans as they go down this road. Maybe you can perhaps comment on that, because I think there needs to be an appreciation that each province really defines its own destiny in many respects to this.
I want to thank you first for all the work that you did, Mr. Massey from Windsor West, on your bill. You were the champion in 2016 on 221, and you've been a great ally to me, because I did draw number 7 overall in the private members bill, and I did come to you right away because I did see the need in this country of single event betting. As you well know, the provinces in this country, other than New Brunswick, right now have 30 years of regulating lotteries, gaming. They have all the expertise. You're exactly right on that. Like I said, I thought Quebec and maybe BC might get the jump a month in if this bill does pass. There's others that may not bring this bill out for a year. I mean, they'll have those discussions. I can look at the Western Canada Lottery Corporation, head office Leduc, Alberta. They may take a little longer, because they're dealing with 3 provinces and 1 territory. Will you still go to the corner grocery store to fill out a sheet, or will you go to an app? These are questions that only the provincial authorities are looking at right now. Some are ahead of others. Some may take a little while. So we'll see how this goes. I mean, the provinces are ready for this. And I don't have to tell you, this is 10 years in the making. They're still gun shy on this bill because they have been disappointed in the past, not only with yours, but Mr. Cromarty's and then Bill C-627. So, I mean, but they are ready, and we'll see where that goes.
And this isn't the first time we've actually modernized our laws. Mr. Comartin as well, Shaughnessy Cohen, Liberal cabinet minister at the time, that worked on the dice, the dice games with regards to it, because it goes back to basically colonial times, and that. So it's hard to believe, but it's true. So with regards to, I guess the jobs related to this, I think that there shouldn't be an underestimation about maybe some of the high-tech sector with regards to it. I know that there's often focus on casino jobs or jobs that are just immediately related to tourism and that. Can you speak a little bit about the value-added jobs from those in the sector? I know in Halifax there's a company out there, and then there's app companies elsewhere. There's more than just the hospitality jobs. I want, if you could touch on that, please.
Well, I was surprised in my province when I talked to Zane Hansen last week after this did get through the House of Commons with a vote of 303 to 15. He's the CEO of Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority, and they're working on an app today because their casinos have been shut down 7 of the last 12 months. He had over 2,000 employees. He's down to 125 today. And he has that because we're shut down for another month in Saskatchewan. He doesn't know when the casinos will open. But on the other hand, this has given them a chance to refit. And they've reached out to several companies about gaming, if they can have an agreement with the provincial government in Saskatchewan for single event gaming. But in the meantime, they're looking at, and everybody is digital now. A good portion of this country has gone digital. And this has given companies in this country a real good reset and come forth with ideas and how we can enjoy gaming. I mean, I sit on the plain lots coming back and forward and everyone's playing solitaire. There's others on casino sites playing, spinning slots and so on. You just have to look over a seat or two and you realize how big this is in North America, the entertainment industry, I will say, with gaming.
And real quick, I just have a minute. Your notation about organized crime is accurate. I mean, and as well, if we don't have any revenue stream coming in, I don't think there's been any evidence showing that organized crime is helping sustain social programs to deal with the consequences for those with addiction gaming or other types of issues that come out of this issue.
Yeah, we know there's $14 billion plus going to organized crime and off-site websites. Now, listen, if this passes, do you think we're going to get all that into the provincial authority? Of course not. But we're going to get a good portion of that. And that's what we need. In my province, we give it back to small communities for arts, for culture, for sports. And I would say that in this country, a lot of provincial authorities give that money back to these kind of organizations to make the communities that much better. But you're absolutely right with organized crime. That is an issue that we have to look at in this country.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Massey and Mr. Waugh. We'll go into our second round of 5 minutes, starting with Mr. Lewis. Go ahead, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Ms. Finley is going to take these questions.
Okay, go ahead, Madam Finley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank my colleague, Kevin Waugh, MP for Saskatoon Grasswood, for sponsoring this bill. We certainly, it's a bit of deja vu for me because when Joe Comartin first brought this up some years ago, I was, I think, on the Justice Committee then, so I'm revisiting this, and I think things have evolved quite a bit, I would say. In my riding, MP Waugh of South Surrey White Rock, we border on Washington State, and they have had legalized single event betting in tribal casinos. Could you speak to how much economic activity is being lost in border communities like mine, where neighboring U.S. states have legalized single event sports betting in some capacity?
Yeah, thank you, MP Finley, and thank you for the history going back when this bill actually came first time to the Justice Committee, and it did pass through the Justice Committee and into the House. Yeah, so that was good. You're losing billions of dollars. There is no question. And especially in British Columbia. I look at the single game betting for sports where you're on the border to Washington. They're going to get a new NHL franchise this fall. They have NFL football. They have, the Seattle Mariners or Major League Baseball. You are losing out in millions of dollars that the province of BC could give back to the communities in your neighborhoods. I would say, and I've watched and I've looked at the graph of ProLine and Sports Select from BC, because you were around 100 million, now you're down to 90, and the graph is continually going down in the province of BC. I can tell you, you've lost at least $10 to $15 million per year on ProLine because of that graph. People are finding ways to enjoy gaming, and they have left the BC Lottery Corporation, and they know that. So I just told you, in 1 year, I've seen a reduction of at least $10 million in betting alone from the BC Lottery Corporation, which could be used in your province.
Well, thank you. Well, speaking of that, I also know from my former life about tax revenues, and this could generate considerable tax revenue. I believe the BC Lottery Corporation, well, I know they support the bill, and they have said that they expect it could mean $125 to $175 million in additional annual revenue in BC. So if this bill is passed, I know that we've spoken a bit already about programs that are out there around treating problem gambling and education. You've looked into this in the most detail. So what programs in that area would you like to see?
Well, I think best practices. I've got a responsible gaming program across Canada review in front of me here, put on by the Canadian Gaming Authority. I just said to you, MP Finlay, the provincial governments have regulated gaming in this country now for the last 30 years. They've got a good head start on the addiction program, on mental health program. They have the expertise. There's been a ton. This one was 2020, where the responsible gambling program was put out by the Canadian Gaming Association. This is where some of the money has got to go. When this bill does pass, we continue to, we also know that there are the most vulnerable. And this has got to continue for the provincial authorities to deal with this, not only in BC, but every jurisdiction in this country. And I think everybody seems to be on board that, yeah, we're going to get maybe a windfall. And you mentioned 150 to 175 million if this bill passes in the province of BC. But let's not blow this money. Let's put some back into the gambling programs, the addiction programs, which, you know, as MPs, we have no authority over, but we can certainly have those conversations. And I've had those conversations with several provincial jurisdictions.
I appreciate that. I think my time is up. The Madam Chair is smiling at me indulgently. So thank you very much. And thank you for being here today.
Yeah,
thank you, Madam Finlay. We'll now go to Mr. Maloney for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me add my congratulations to my friend, Mr. Waugh, on successfully navigating his bill through the House of Commons. Getting through things through the House is never easy, as we all know. And I share your sentiment about working together, a sentiment that's been reinforced in my mind more recently. Look, just for starters, I support this bill, and I understand the reasoning behind it and the issue with respect to illegal gambling. I mean, look, the fact is I can go out tomorrow in 5 minutes and book a bet, place a bet on anything I want and any amount of money I want, and everybody here can. And if you don't know somebody, you can find somebody in 5 minutes. So it makes sense. My concern is that the implications that flow from it, because as we all know, I mean, gambling in Canada and here in Ontario, what I can speak to, you know, it's been an evolution. You talk about Sports Pro Line. I remember when that came out, it was monumental. It was you know, groundbreaking stuff, and everybody rushed out and started betting on 3 hockey games at the time, including me, and then I did it twice and the novelty wore off. But the concern is that this is going to lead to bigger gambling problems. Now, I've done some reading, and I'm a avid hockey fan. I know you talked about sports already, but the Hockey News just came out with its recent edition titled Power and Money. And in that, there's an article about how the NHL is going to recover from COVID and the impact it's had on there. And one of the things they talk about extensively is gambling, and specifically single game betting. And so the road they go down is what these teams are using this as a means to generate more revenue. So while they're supporting the issue based on, you know, getting rid of criminal activity, you know, greed and desire to make money is sometimes cloaked in nobility. And I think there's a bit of that going on here. So some of these teams are anxiously awaiting this. In fact, this article makes very clear the NHL is really, really hoping this is done in time for the playoffs, because there's a lot of money to be made by the league. It's going to drive fans into rinks. And this is where my question is. A lot of these teams are going to say, okay, now we are now driving people to bet on games, and we're doing it at the games. It's bringing people, you know, putting bums in seats and putting fingers on bets. We want a piece of the action. Do you have any concern that the teams are going to take that greed and advertise, promote, and encourage people to participate in this activity in a way that's going to be a detriment to people's mental health and addictions?
Thanks for that question, MP Maloney. Let's be honest with this. Rogers Sportsnet, billions of dollars on the 12 or 13 year contract they got from the National Hockey League. How do you get that today to pay for itself? People are not staying. We saw with the Super Bowl, Mr. Maloney, that the lowest rating since 2006, and yet we had a storyline of one of the great quarterbacks of all time, Tom Brady, against the upstart, Kansas City Chiefs. So yes, the NHL is losing billions of dollars in the last year because of COVID. They desperately want to retrieve some of the money that they have lost. We've seen advertising that is going to be taking place around the boards, on the ice, maybe even on the sweater. And I can tell you one of the major concerns is the TV audience. Ratings are a big concern right now. And all sports, there was an article by Dan Barnes in the Calgary Herald last Thursday that the Canadian Football League needs this bill to pass because they need the younger generation to get engaged in the sport. They are like the NHL. You need bums and seats. The CFL didn't run at all last year. And if they don't run this year, I doubt the league will ever get off ground again. So yes, this is an avenue that all professional leagues need right now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wall. Yeah, and I've only have 30 seconds, so this is going to be more of a statement. And for that, I really do appreciate your efforts on this. But you use the CFL as an example. So somebody brought up rigged games. That's not going to happen in the NHL and the NBA because these guys make so much money. You can't. It's impossible. I would worry more about leagues like the CFL or the Canadian Premier League soccer teams where these players aren't making a lot of money. So that there is some basis for concern in that regard and some of these other leagues. So depending on how the provinces roll this out and what leagues are allowed to participate and how they're allowed to participate. So I just want to make sure these safeguards are on the radar. That's all. And I'm out of time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Maloney. We'll now go to Monsieur Fortin. 2.5 minutes, sir. Please go ahead.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Waugh. Well, it's no secret. I agree. We support this project, this bill, and we think that there are a number of reasons for which the government of Quebec, at least for us and other provincial governments as well, let them manage this industry and use profits for good purposes. So we're certainly on the same wavelength in this regard. But I would like to hear you, we haven't much time, I would like to hear you on the difference between C-13 and C-218. 218, you're asking for the repeal of the specific section, whatever it is, and your thoughts on C-13, on horse racing. If C-13 were adopted, would that be sufficient, or should we really repeal the section at issue?
Yes, last Thursday in the House of Commons, the government withdrew their bill, C-13. It was similar to mine. It had a couple of amendments dealing with the horse racing, the protection of the horse racing industry and the parimutuels. I would be open to those amendments in the Justice Committee. I am surprised at you because you lost a professional hockey team in your province, in the Quebec Nordiques, and you've never recovered from it. You have an empty arena in Quebec City, and here you are asking questions about C-13, and I was prepared for the Quebec Nordiques and their demise, gone to Colorado, when we need to fill the Coliseum in Quebec City.
Okay, so je comprends que vous ne. Quant à vous, vous.
All right, I understand that you would be quite satisfied with the C-13 amendment, but you would prefer an outright repeal, given that your bill is the one you think we should be passing.
Government did support my bill, and there's included the horse racing amendments. So yes, you will look at those in Justice Committee and make the decision, but I am open.
Merci, Monsieur Waugh.
Thank you. Thank you, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Waugh.
Back to Mr. Massey for 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I remember the Nordiques, and the last time we went through this bill was the promise of the Nordiques being returned to Quebec as reason not to do the bill by some. So it didn't work out that way either. Now, Mr. Waugh, you mentioned consumer protection, actually, and that doesn't get a lot of attention. And like if you go on our phones, you can look and get all kinds of apps for sports betting, and you can bet overseas and so forth like that. But we don't know the margins and also the consumer issues with some of these nefarious sites. Can you maybe note about how consumer protections might be better regulated through this, because we still don't know. Some are better than others with regards to these offshore sites, and maybe you can highlight that a bit, please.
Oh, you're right. The Bodog Bet 365, they have different odds to lure the bettors onto their sites. I do notice today in the Toronto Star, they had the 6 NHL games, the lines. They had the 9 NBA games, the lines, but they will change. I mean, that happens, but most papers in this country now provide betting lines each day. And it's not years ago it was Proline that would buy an ad in the paper and give you the list of games. That's not happening now because the consumer realizes single game betting is where it's at. That's what their appetite is. And the provinces need to have this to compete against the illegal sites and criminal organizations, because this will be regulated in part through Las Vegas because of the gaming and the set of the lines. For an example, if somebody is out of the lineup, that will certainly change the odds of that game when you do come to bet on it.
Thank you. And I know I'm running out of time, Madam Chair, but I agree with we should look at the considerations of the horse racing industry, although a lot of their issues as well will be regulated provincially as well too, but they're worthwhile to examine and take very serious. And thank you, Mr. Waugh.
No, thank you, MP Massey, for all your work again on your bill and, piggybacking with me on my PMB 218.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Massey and Mr. Waugh. So that does conclude our time here today with Mr. Waugh. Members, thank you for a very, very informative meeting, and I'll see you at the next one. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.